Hello everyone, in today's video I get the 1/25th scale AMT Camaro body assembled and prepped for primer, and I modify the interior tub so that it fits the chassis. Over this past week, I was really able to dive into the Camaro build that I introduced a while back, and just like with the 85 Mustang project, I'm utilizing the 3D printable FFR SC1 chassis. I decided to start by working on the body. The first thing that I needed to do was remove these inner fender sections that are molded as a part of the body piece, so I will have more room for the front suspension and steering assembly. I used a hot knife to easily remove these sections. With these parts removed, I now have much more room under the hood. I wanted to clean up the cut, first by doing a little bit of trimming with some side cutters, and then using a file to smooth down the rough edges, as well as a rotary tool to remove some additional material around where the wheels will be. After this, I moved on to removing some of the body parts from the parts tree, starting with the front fascia and spoiler. I also removed the hood from the parts tree as well, and used an X-Acto knife and a sanding stick to smooth out the rough section where the part was attached. I test fit the hood and fascia, and notice that I will need to do a bit of sanding to the hood in order to get it to fit well. I sanded down the outer edges of the hood until it fit properly. I also used some sandpaper to scuff up the surface so that the primer will adhere better. In addition, I did a little bit of sanding on a few sections of the fascia that needed some work, and moved on to trimming and sanding any imperfections on the body, especially around the windows and wheel wells. Just like I've shown on previous bodies, I like to mark any mold lines with a permanent marker, and then sand them so that they are smooth. These sanding sticks really came in handy for removing the mold lines. This is my first time using them, and I highly recommend getting a set. I found them to be very helpful. After continuing to trim and sand in a few more spots, I moved on to removing the clear plastic pieces from the parts tree and test fitting them to ensure that they fit properly. Earlier, I noticed that the spoiler doesn't fit great, since it seems to be a couple millimeters too long. Because of this, I decided to cut it into 3 individual pieces along the panel line, do a little bit of sanding to make the overall length shorter, and glue each individual piece to the body, which I will show a little later on. I noticed some imperfections on the front fascia piece, so I decided to fill them in with a little bit of hobby putty. I smeared a little bit on with a toothpick and set it aside to dry. I sanded away any imperfections on the rear bumper and then test fit it onto the body. Although it isn't a great fit since it seems to be a bit too long in relation to the body, just like the spoiler was, there isn't a whole lot I can do to improve this, so I went ahead and glued it, trying to line it up the best I could. I used the back of a hobby knife to deepen the panel gaps. After the filler that I used on the front was dried, I sanded the section smooth and flush with the rest of the part. I then glued it to the rest of the body. I sanded the transition between the 2 pieces to make it smooth and to prevent either part from looking like it sticks out. Since the lower front spoilers on the full-size cars are one piece, I decided to use a little bit of putty to fill the gap between these sections just to make the car look a little more authentic. Just like with the front fascia, once these sections have dried, I will sand them smooth. I moved on to test fitting some more parts, starting with the rear window, followed by the interior tub and dash. After some time had passed, I sanded the spots where I applied the putty. I also deepened some of the panel gaps using the back of a hobby knife. Next, I moved on to test fitting the taillights. I needed to do a little bit of sanding to get them both to fit well. I then glued each individual spoiler piece onto the back. I ended up using a lot of glue since the spoiler didn't seem to fit the shape of the body, though after a little bit of sanding, I got it looking how I wanted, and the excess glue shouldn't be a problem. I wanted to figure out a way to securely attach the hood that will still allow it to be removed. I decided to use some small magnets to hold the hood in place. I started by gluing the magnets onto the back side of the hood. I then used a paint pen to add a bunch of paint to the bottom of the magnets, and I then pressed the hood in place. This will mark where I need to make the holes for the bottom magnets to be placed. I created pilot holes by heating up a pin and pressing it into the plastic. I then drilled the holes larger, and then eventually used a reamer to get them to the correct size. I then pressed the hood with the magnets attached into position, and then used some glue to hold the bottom magnets in place. I now wanted to turn my attention over to the chassis and interior tub. I need to make some modifications so that the interior will be positioned properly and so that there is enough room for the electronics. I started by roughly marking where I wanted to make some cuts so that the interior can be positioned further back. The chassis that I assembled for this project in a previous video ended up getting used for a prototype, so I printed and assembled this new chassis. I assembled it just like I did the previous one, using a little bit of super glue to help give it some added strength and rigidity. I once again used a hot knife to effortlessly remove these sections of the interior tub. I started by only removing a little bit of material, and gradually removed more and more until the interior was positioned on the chassis exactly where I wanted it. Here is how it looked after I was finished. It now sits much further back than before, since this section has now been removed. After test fitting to the body, I noticed that the rear section of the chassis was just a little bit too wide, so I filed down the sides so that it will fit. I also test fitted everything with the battery installed. It's tight, but it'll work. Next, I wanted to remove a section around the transmission tunnel area so that there will be ample room for the motor mount. I assembled the motor mount and positioned it onto the chassis to make sure that there is enough clearance. I will be using a torque arm rear suspension for this car, so I wanted to install the chassis mount for the torque arm and make any necessary modifications to the interior tub. As you can see, I will need to remove some material from this section of the interior. I started by using a rotary tool just to see if grinding away some of the material would be enough to have the necessary clearance. This ended up not being enough though, so I ended up cutting out a section so that there is plenty of room. Finally, I needed to install the steering servo and see what modifications need to be made to the interior with this component in position. I started by marking where I wanted to make some cuts, and then used a hot knife to cut this section out, just like I've done previously. I gradually make the opening bigger as needed, making sure that I don't remove more material than I have to. I'm also going to need to remove some material from the dash and console to ensure that I have enough room for the servo arm to move. While I was waiting for the hot knife to heat up, I figured I would test fit and assemble all of the seats. It looks like I'll be able to block off a lot of the chassis that's visible from the interior by installing the rear seats over top, which will work out great. I'm really glad they decided to make the rear seats a separate piece and not mold it as a part of the interior tub. Prior to gluing the individual pieces of the seats together, I used a knife to clean up the edge and sanded anywhere that needed it. After finishing the seats, I went back to working on the interior and dash, removing sections of each so that there will be plenty of room for the servo arm. wanted to make sure that there was enough room for the torque arm, so I decided to grind away some of the material from the bottom of the interior tub. And this is where I'm going to end today's video. There is still a little bit more work I need to do before I start painting. I still need to figure out exactly how I'm going to mount the interior tub and body to the chassis. I've got a pretty solid idea of how I'm going to go about doing that. I'd also like to get the chassis fully assembled with all of the remaining electronic and suspension components so that I can verify that everything fits and that there are no clearance issues before painting. Of course, I will be showcasing all of this in a future video. I was able to make progress on several other projects this week as well, but with this video already exceeding 20 minutes in length, I figured I'd get this video finished and uploaded, and include the other progress I've made in a separate video, which I will hopefully be able to have up within the next week or two. Like always, I want to conclude today's video by showcasing some of the awesome work that's been posted in the Make It RC Facebook group. Thank you all very much for watching. 2 days ago marked the 1-year anniversary of my first upload to this channel, and the growth and support over this past year has been incredible and far beyond my expectations. I really appreciate all of the support, and I'm looking forward to creating more content in the years to come. Thanks again everyone, and I will see you next time.